Welcome to episode 57 of the PoddyC. This week, Blizzard has saved Mythic Plus again. Crazy how it needs saving and gets saving so often. But yeah, they've fixed a lot of, I think, the big pain points that people have had going into season 2. I mean, there already were a lot of fixes coming in, but for those unfollowed, maybe I'll pull this up and we can use
Well,
our
do you
cool
think you
recap
guys,
to,
first of
to
all,
scroll along.
we've done this 57 times. That's crazy. Number two, would you guys would have guessed that like going into this expansion, they're like, we're finally designing keys for high key players. Affixes are gone. Do you think if you could see into the future and see the beginning of this podcast where we're saying here in January 2025 that they have yet again saved Mythic Plus, would that have been surprising to you last year when you, or would it, like, would you say that maybe it would never be surprising if we were to peer into the future and a podcast would start with they have saved Mythic Plus again? If at any point that would not be surprising?
Well, surprising for what reason, I guess.
It needing to be saved.
Oh, I don't think that's surprising at all.
Do you think that there will always, like, no matter how good or how long Mythic Plus is be out, it will always need to be saved?
No, I just feel like M Plus has its ups and downs because, there's
yeah.
plenty of seasons where we feel M Plus doesn't need to be saved. Like season 3 of Dragonflight, that was a pretty damn good season. I don't think anyone was like particularly dooming or being like, oh, this needs to be saved. Or same with like, I would say a large part of Legion. Legion, maybe it's just because it was new at the time, but players didn't really feel like, oh, we need to save M Plus. It was just like, wow, there's like something fun that we can just do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like anytime they make big changes, they often have to come back and like fix whatever they broke with the big changes. Um, that definitely has happened with M Plus over the past, year where they've done. I would say there were kind of three big waves of changes, right? There was the like Dragonflight season 4 key level change. Then there was going into War Within where they were like, "Yep, we like it. We're not going to make any changes." And everybody was like, "No, come on, man, change something." And so they did the whole affix rework thing. And now we're getting to this point where it's like, okay, difficulty and rewards have been out of whack. And they sort of already did one fix to that. They pushed it straight to live with the like getting way more crests from keys. And then also throughout the season, they made it so it's like, okay, you can get gildeds from like one lower level key, right? But then going into next season, they're making it so that you get gildeds and stuff from way lower keys. You can get gildeds from 7s now. They made it so that the scaling of all the keys is way lower, which is nice. They took away Challenger's Peril and put it in just 12s and higher, which is huge for everybody that doesn't do 12s and higher. And they took away the like extra scaling at 12s and higher as well, sort of. I guess they didn't put in the nerf to scaling that happens in low keys above 10, so I guess there is still the scaling does still get steeper, but it's like less steeper than before.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's huge.
You're right about that. Yeah.
They've done a bunch of stuff to.
I think there was one other change
better.
you forgot that they made last expansion that really heavily impacted Mythic Plus this expansion. And it wasn't a Mythic Plus change at all. It was the tank change.
Oh yeah.
Right? The tanks have been nerf thing, and that was also directly addressed in their statements here, right?
Yeah.
Not fully. I mean, it's like a band-aid. That's the best.
They were like, we're going to. Here we go. We've already approached our season 2 dungeon roll in PTR, an ongoing tuning with an eye towards addressing mechanical issues. Cast times on critical enemy spells have been significantly increased. Tank damage spikes reduced in magnitude, and/or given better telegraphs, and the overall number of threats in an average pack has been reduced. I think that paragraph, if they follow through with that, that is, I think, by far the biggest news of all of this, because that is what I think people want the most.
Yeah, well, so from my experience so far, what makes that statement kind of not what I would like is the dungeons already started out insane. Like let's just put it on a scale, right? Let's just say these dungeons right now are set to 12 out of 10. So what they essentially did was they dropped it down to, maybe 9 out of 10, which is still kind of crazy, right? Like I think what a lot of players would want is maybe closer to like a 7 out of 10.
This is based on the dungeons you've done on PTR so far?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're judging it based on what you think. Do you think they've already done this thing? Like you're judging this based on you think they've already completed what they think is the nerfing of all these things?
I would hope not. I mean, oftentimes Blizzard does make these changes and it'll be one and done, right? Like they'll push out these changes and it'll be like, all right, we did it. We saved them plus. And why are people still complaining when the season comes out? Then they would have to do like another set of nerfs, and then maybe like a month or two into the patch, they do another set of nerf. And this has been a really frequent Blizzard.
I mean,
type
they
of,
did hit Priory like multiple. They hit a couple of these dungeons already, multiple weeks of PTR testing.
Yeah.
But it is definitely
I'm not
true
saying
that
like
there's not an awful lot of weeks of PTR testing left, right? So
Right.
I think it's fair to say that directionally they're moving M Plus in a good direction with all the things they're doing to it. But I agree with you that there is still, we might not end up still far enough in this direction by the time it goes live, and there may still be more that needs to be done if they. I think the frustrating thing for us as well is that it feels like a huge easy step towards fixing this would be to revert the misguided tank nerfs that they did going into this expansion, right? And like instead of doing that, they're kind of coming up with like they would need to do like 300 nerfs across the dungeons if they don't want to, just buff tanks, but they clearly don't want to buff tanks, and so that kind of sucks.
Oh, it's actually really bad right now. I was gonna talk about it. So right now, I think tanks are even weaker than last season. I don't know if it's because we don't have AUG buffing the tank anymore. Like that's probably a huge part of the equation. But right now, so aggro is extremely bad. Tank damage is maybe at an all-time low. Like I don't know what it is exactly, but your damage is awful compared to DPS. You know how we talked about in one of our podcast episodes, what is the ideal tank to DPS damage ratio?
I think it was
right
like
now
80%,
it feels
70%.
Yeah, something like that. But right now it feels awful. Right now it's like
it's like 30%
or less.
Yeah,
it is real bad.
Like,
I mean, if you're having threat issues with good tanks and good players, that means that they're doing way too little damage, because that's been pretty rare even in recent times.
Yeah, like you could be blasting, and I mean, now granted, enhancement shamans are OP as hell, but like they will just rip off aggro like nothing, like a fucking band-aid. But tank survivability is also pretty bad at the moment. It's like even with all the tank busters being nerfed, you're still getting meleeed extremely hard, and you're struggling to sustain yourself, which I guess like maybe is Blizzard's goal, because they did mention that in their original tank nerf blue post. But it just feels kind of bad, and I think that's been the pain point of the War of so far. So I'm hoping they will do something about it. And same with the healers too. Like it's not just a tank thing. Like healers right now are kind of lacking in heals.
It feels to me like if your tank isn't the best player in your group by quite a bit, they're going to look like the worst player in your group, because like the amount of responsibility that is shouldered by them now is higher than ever, and the specs are weaker than ever, and I think it just has this really chilling effect on the tank population in pugs and in coordinated groups.
I want to know if I want to have that studied, because like if Blizzard is doing this, like we want to nerf tank busters thing, I wonder if Blizzard sees what the community thinks they see.
I think they do. Like I think they are trying to address this without compromising their initial goal of making tanks and healers have a harmonious partnership in terms of the tank living, which I think is an admirable goal, but I think there was a misguided implementation of how they tried to make that happen. Yeah,
it feels noticeably different compared to previous expansions, and it was really noticeable this season, like current season 1 season. I think a lot of tanks and healers have been struggling and have been falling off, which is like part of why M Plus isn't doing so well.
Yeah. Like I did some medium high-ish keys, like some 15s or whatever as tank, and
I wonder for tanking, we talked about like how they tune a lot of damage targets for like maybe what it does in a Mythic Plus is a +10. Like for years they just like they saw that portal number, like it used to be a 20, now it's a 10 as like the goal. And then like rating, I wonder how much they base like, oh, tanking is in a good spot is based on those things. Like how does tanking feel power wise? What is how much the healer is healing the tank, and the tank reducing damage dynamic in a +10 and in rating? And then maybe Blizzard thinks that's okay. Because maybe that is
in a 10, like I guess the tank buster changes should go a long way towards making tanks less of the weakest link.
Yeah, because that's a Mythic Plus specific change. Like for example, I wonder if Blizzard thinks tanks are weak in raid.
Yeah, I feel like they're fine in raid. I feel.
So that's I think the biggest. That's why I think instead of reverting the tank nerfs and them reverting, instead like focusing on Mythic Plus, is they're probably like, okay, well this isn't a tank specific issue, because like in raid, tanks feel fine even after the changes, but in Mythic Plus, it's an infinitely scaling game mode with mobs that have auto attacks. So like there kind of is infinitely scaling tank damage that keeps ramping up, and you're going to see the limits of that in high Mythic Plus more than anything else. The question is like how much they want to like. Does Blizzard want to make tanking in quotes easier, as if like that would be a bad thing? Like for the +10 and for rating to make it more accessible in high Mythic Plus, or less of a people are doing a thing. I also wonder if Blizzard can see numbers. Like I think the general consensus is tanking is harder now. Tanking is less fun. Therefore, there are less tanks in the group finder and less overall groups being made. Is that correct? I think that's a general community sentiment. Is that true?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I would say so.
I wonder if Blizzard has information that backs that up, and if so, like how they would specifically. I mean, that kind of makes sense for the Mythic Plus targeting. Why it's not a tank class thing, because that spans across multiple game modes. It's like a Mythic Plus thing. But the thing is with Mythic Plus is auto attacks are extremely dangerous, right? And it's not. I mean, the tank busters were a problem in season 1, I think, for a while. But the auto attacks are like crazy on its own, right? So like you're always going to feel that pressure, no matter what. At least if the key is high enough.
Yeah, and also you're the only tank, and there's multiple healers in the raid, so like there's so many different factors. But so I have a question for you guys actually. When has tanking ever been a problem in raid?
Never.
Like the classes, right? Or
Like
maybe not
like
class,
like
the
where
role.
there's been tiers that were really easy for tanks and tiers that were very hard for tanks. But there has been. I don't think the class like it's ever been like tanking as a whole is bad, because tanks have been multi-classers for a long time, and there's usually, even in a tier where maybe it's possible overall tank balance was bad or tanks were getting shit on, there'd be one tank you could play that was sick, like Brewmaster for a few years, or Blood Decay kind of forever. But like usually the tank heavy, the tiers where tanking's really hard is not actually based on incoming damage, it's based on your responsibilities. So like in Hellfire Citadel, on back-to-back bosses, you tanked Zul'Harak, which like had that tank mechanic with the different debuffs on it, which was like crazy hard for tanks, by far the hardest role in the raid. And then you also had what was that Tyrant boss? Tyrant Velhari, was that her name? Where like everyone was under 20% like the whole fight or something like that. Like as a tank, like that was super hard. So like there's been raids like that where it specifically was very difficult for tanks. But
there have been some tiers where you get beat up more than others, like Sired and Athreus, for instance.
The melee is just like meleeed your whole health bar on every tank.
Like that, and even Jailer also sort of like those are bosses where you could die to auto attacks in a way that you can't on, in a lot of other tiers, right? Like Sarkareth tier, for instance, tanks had a somewhat difficult job, especially on Sarkareth. But like, actually, you could kind of die to Sarkareth's autos if you didn't, if you weren't smart, but. Yeah, it's a different kind of difficulty. It's pretty rare though. Like I think that most decently good mythic raid tanks tend to not have too much difficulty with like living the kind of stuff that kills tanks in M+, like
tanking,
auto attacks.
I would just say in general, the answer to your question is tanking has been in a healthy place in raid, I think, forever. And if not forever, like 95% of the time, like across all the tanks.
Yeah, I will say there are some tiers where, like, if you're not playing the meta tanks, you can get more shafted than others. Like I do that. Jailer was an example.
A couple of Guardian Druid raids that were probably pretty tough.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you brought the wrong tank to some fights, you could have a really hard time by comparison. But like you said, Max, most tanks are the most multi-classer roles, reaching down to the lowest guilds compared to the other roles. So it's still a problem. There are a lot of one-trick tanks out there that, if they reach a boss too early, are going to have some trouble.
And tanks still affect raids in a similar way to dungeons, where like you feel like you have the most important role. You don't feel like this in a lot of raids because you overgear the content pretty quick. But like a lot of people who are listening to this can probably relate to being in a guild with one tank that's maybe not so good, and like how many pulls go bad because they've used a res on this person, or this person's dead and you can't recover. And it's like, yeah, like a DPS could have died and we would have saw 30% more on the boss, but this tank died and we kind of all know we're dead right away. That does kind of persist in that same way if you have someone who's not as good in your group.
Yeah, so the reason I ask this question is because like I wonder if Blizzard actually thinks about this and is like, oh, maybe we need to nerf tanks because they're a little bit too powerful in raid, or like we need to strike a perfect balance in raid. Because I don't actually know if there's like ever been that type of situation where it's like, oh, tanks need to be buffed or nerfed because of raid. I would assume that they would touch the encounter rather than the role.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say the one thing that maybe would support that theory, Dorky, is that historically, going back, like, not last expansion, maybe not Shadowlands, but before that, I think people pretty often describe tanking as, like, this role is very important, but it's also not that hard, right? Like, your jobs often are the easiest of any role on a lot of these fights. It's just if you screw them up, your raid will wipe instead of you will die, right? Or like you dying leads to the raid wiping. I think that was a pretty common way for people to describe the tanking role in raid, but I don't think that's even been true recently. I don't think.
Yeah.
Like, I think over the past like 3 at least years, I don't think anybody really describes tanking that way anymore, because a lot of the tank mechanics are a lot more involved than they used to be in those. Because in the old expansions, there were a lot of fights where it's like, yep, this boss is tank swap. You know, you have to do the tank swap, and if you do that, you'll live. If you don't, you'll die. These days, it's, you know, tanking has a lot more going on.
Well, I wonder if those tank changes last expansion, I've never thought of this before. I wonder if that was a continuation on the thinking, like basically what led them to that point. Was it like, oh, tanks are too powerful all the time? Or do you think it was a change that was just adjacent to the other changes they made to stop the no healing shit?
Maybe.
Yeah, I 100% believe
they were
in that theory,
but that wasn't the
they were worried about
problem
it.
though. Like
It wasn't,
like,
but they probably just like didn't see the full picture.
Yeah, it's like foolproofing it. If you like because they're like, okay, well, we can keep nerfing Nature's Vigil and Ancestral, or literally remove Ancestral Guidance, or take out Vampiric Embrace or nerf it. But like, here's the way we can make sure healers are always needed. Let's just make it so they have to heal tanks, right? And I would just say that's like definitely not the way to solve that problem, because like the relationship that tanks and healers have had for a long time was pretty healthy, I think.
Yeah. I do think there were some healers that did complain that they felt like they weren't involved in whether the tank lived or died. But the problem
100%.
is that, like, you still don't have full control over your tank living or dying, right? Like, before it was like your tank died if your tank sucked, and now it's your tank dies if your tank sucks or if your healer sucks, right? And like, I don't know. I feel like that's not actually that much more agency for the healer role.
Well, so at least for season 1 of Orphan, it definitely feels like the healer has a larger impact. I mean, maybe it's just because Prop Paladin is the meta at the moment, and with what's that ability called? The one that shares their HP.
Oh, Tempered in Battle.
Yeah, Tempered in Battle.
Yeah.
Tempered in Battle actually makes the healer so impactful in a lot of encounters. Like I'll notice that like if the entire group is low, the tank will sit pretty low, because the tank is just constantly sharing HP with somebody else, and it kind of demands the healer to pump out a ton of HPS to kind of keep the entire group alive, rather than just the triage healing of, you know, keeping the DPS alive. So it's definitely noticeable, and I do feel Blizzard kind of hit the spot that they wanted to hit initially. It's just, is that spot that they hit actually good for the game or not? And I don't personally feel it's good, but I do know some healers absolutely have been enjoying that change, because, you know, there are healers out there like Automatic Jag that just really enjoy pumping out HPS and just like being him in the group. Like, I want to be him. But
right, which historically it was pretty rare for there to be the healers getting to be the, you know, the reason that you timed a key, right? Like, there were, in fact, that happened with like Court of Stars at the start of Dragonflight, and then they nerfed it because everybody complained because their healers weren't him, right?
Yeah, exactly. Same with
but now it kind of feels like your tank and your healer both have to be him for you to live these fights.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool having those types of situations. I mean, for sure. Like, I'm just remembering back when I was watching JB heal in BFA, when he's like doing a world first Temple of Sephiroth, and just like the whole anticipation of him going into Galvats, and just like, it's like a whole Rocky montage. It's like, all right, here we go, everyone tune in. JB versus Galvats in like a world first 24 temple, and like, that's hype. And I feel like Blizzard wants to capture that moment for healers, but it's just kind of gone too far. And it's
the thing about Galvats though was that like Galvats was hard for your healer, but it was actually easy for your tank, right? Like, that was not a particularly hard tank fight. In fact, the biggest thing you could do as a tank is take pressure off the rest of your group, because you had a relatively easy time with it, right? And so like you kind of understood when you could take extra stacks or whatever to prevent the rest. But like, now it feels like the fights that are hard for your healers are hard because they also, because your tank is dying and your group is dying, instead of Galvast, which was like your group is dying, but your tank isn't dying, right? And so like that was a healer fight, whereas now even the healer fights are healer and tank fights.
Yeah, like still involved.
Yeah, I also really like, I liked Galvast existing. I liked it being true that if you got to a high key, of the 8 dungeons in the pool, like 3 of them had a hard healer boss, 3 of them had a hard tank boss, a couple of them had like a hard everybody boss, right? Like, I think that's fine. I don't know, just the general dynamic, I feel like the pressure put, especially on tanks and to a lesser extent healers, is like a couple of key levels above where it should be.
I would say the biggest problem is it's just happening everywhere, right? Like, normally you would have, okay, so this part would be like a hard pull for the tank, this pull would be a hard pull for the healer, but now it's just every pull is like kind of hard for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I'm hard too. Like, so like it's hard for them, but what?
Dorki. I mean, that's fine. Stay hard.
All right.
What else about this post? Like specific things. There was so much to this. Truly, I think we could probably do like a decent conversation on like almost every point. Cast times we talked about. Yeah, they mentioned how there was like this huge, like basically they were having people go into delves, and then like reward wise, the next thing that made sense was to go into a +7 or +8, which is just a way harder like thing. It's like they're not able to learn the dungeons. People aren't making groups below that because the rewards don't line up. So them making the rewards line up is a huge thing. Also, they made Mythic Zeros matter again, which we kind of called because they did this in Season 4. Everything they're doing in Mythic Zero this patch already existed in Season 4 of last expansion, but they made Mythic Zero worse in Season 1 for what we believe is just to emphasize delves being content. But by doing that, they totally fucked up the entire reward track and caused all the problems, most of the problems that they're solving with the reward changes here.
Dude, I'm pretty sure it was intentional.
I mean, it has to be. Why would you deliberately change it away from that to make it something that no one would ever do?
Yeah, exactly. Like they wanted to err on the side of delves being too rewarding because they can buff up the other stuff later. Whereas if the first season of delves just sucked, a lot of people would just never do them again, right? Like that. It makes sense, right? It's like why all the new champions, they err on being broken rather than being too weak in League, right? Like, you want the new stuff. It's easier to have it be too good and then everybody gets their hands on it and then you nerf it, rather than like, if it comes out and it sucks, that there will be people who never touch it again.
Yeah, or it's like Celestial Barrage and Plunderstorm. When I was talking to the dev about Plunderstorm, he actually mentioned how it's better to, like, err on the side of it coming out being strong so that like they can tune it down afterwards rather than it starting out weak and nobody playing it.
Then, and it kind of depends on different kinds of game philosophies for that too. Like, for an example, I was talking to Spawn. He's a League guy. He's like Team Liquid's League coach, but he loves ARPG. So I was talking to him about PoE 2. And he said, like, I totally lost interest in PoE 2 when I was, like, playing this build that I'd kind of figured out. It was the first one I ever started PoE 1 with, and it was super OP, and then they nerfed it to the point where I literally couldn't even cast spells because they nerfed the mana regen, and my character was just dead. And it was like, that's the opposite way of thinking that, right? You make sure that things are good, and then you nerf them. But in some games, in some game design,
right,
that can, like, totally fuck you, and you'd rather, like, do it the other way around.
I think the big difference is in PoE, there's a massive investment required. So like, like you're building towards a certain build, you have like all your jewels and your skill gems and stuff. So if you have to change it up after it gets nerfed, that's probably way
that's
more
a huge
friction.
part of the reason why they typically don't nerf outside of new leagues in PoE 1. And when they do,
it's actually like what they mentioned.
Yeah, like that they've been scandals. And usually it's a case of like, oh, this build is turbo broken, we have to nerf it. And then everybody's like mad still because they invested in characters. And then GGG is like, okay, but like, come on, this was trivializing
the alternative.
game.
Yeah, the alternative is like everyone feels like they now have to make the super broken thing and change what they're doing. So like, and then if they end up nerfing it later, more people are affected. But then it's like, if you're one of the early adopters or literally the person to figure it out, you're like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, the PoE 1 community is insufferable. God.
I've been saying this for years, by the way.
It's worse than Classic.
Bro, you are fucking speaking my language.
This is a huge tangent, but yeah, it is.
Dude,
they are.
Bro, I've been so right about this.
If you're a PoE 1 fan, think about how the last like year has gone for you, which is like PoE 2's been announced. They're like, yeah, we're gonna develop this simultaneously. It's not gonna impact PoE 1. Both of these games will coexist. It'll be happy. There'll be unicorns and rainbows. And
wait, give some background lore first, Janos.
Like, so they announced PoE 2, right? And that's basically what they said is like, well, originally it was going to be one game, 2 end games, and then they were like, okay, no, we're splitting off PoE 2 into its own game. And some PoE 1 fans, because there was a huge sense of kind of concern among PoE 1 fans that PoE 2 wouldn't be for them, and its existence would mean that PoE 1 would either die or be changed to be like PoE 2, or basically there was a fear of like, we have loved PoE 1 for the last however long, and we're worried that we don't like this change, right? Like we don't like that we're risking it going away. And GGG did a lot to like assuage that fear by saying, no, look, PoE 1's still gonna get support. It's still gonna get new leagues. It's not, you're not, the game isn't going away. We hope you'll like PoE 2. We hope you'll try it out. But if you don't like it, you're still gonna have PoE 1. And everyone was like, okay, cool. So then, PoE 2 Early Access gets announced to be coming out in the summer of last year. GGG pushes it back. They're like, no, okay, we can't do summer. We'll do November. We need to cook more, right? We'll do November. But here's the new PoE 1 League. And so the PoE 1 League comes out and everyone's like, woo, this is fun. Yeah, woohoo. That was in July of last year. Now, historically, PoE 1 Leagues come out every 4 months. Actually, before that, it was every 3 months, but they moved to a 4-month cycle. And everybody was kind of like, okay, we've got our July League. Maybe we'll get a league right before the PoE 2 launch. And a lot of people were like, okay, no, that's not realistic, right? Like they'll probably delay this one because they don't want it to come out right at the same time as PoE 2 Early Access. Sure, right? And so then PoE gets delayed again, another 3 weeks. And so, of course, then PoE 1 is sort of further delayed. And PoE 2 comes out, it's like December 6th, I think, was when it eventually did come out of Early Access. And GGG sort of implied or let people believe or suggested that the PoE 1 League would be in this February, which is already now a historically long, right? Remember, we're talking about July was the time the last one came out. Usually they're every 4 months. So now we're looking at like an eight-month league, right? Then at the end of January, they make this they release a video where they're basically like, yeah, turns out taking all of the PoE 1 devs off of PoE 1 and putting them on PoE 2 meant that we weren't actually getting any work done on PoE 1. And it turns out that we actually have had to keep them on PoE 2, and we still have to keep them on PoE 2, and we have to keep them on PoE 2 until the next major patch for PoE 2 comes out, and then probably for a couple weeks after, if we're being realistic. And then they can start on the new PoE 1 League.
Yeah, this was announced yesterday.
Yeah. So basically, like the TLDR here is like, if you optimistically, it's probably like April, and realistically, it's maybe like May. So we're looking at maybe approaching a full year for of no PoE 1 content. After that was a concern of the PoE 1 player base that the company basically were like, yeah, we're don't worry, this won't be a problem, right? And then it has exactly turned out to be a problem. And the thing that was unpredictable for the company, that the thing they didn't see coming, was that taking all the devs off of PoE 1 was going to slow down PoE 1 progress. So I don't know. I feel like it's justified to be somewhat skeptical of this explanation.
Okay, so the thing is with the PoE 1 community is that they have been peak insufferable for a very long time before this happened, but it sounds like they all have a very strong reason to be upset about it. I mean, they just do the really insecure thing where like every other game is dog shit and I have to let you know that, instead of just playing your game and being happy with it, which is just the most insufferable behavior possible.
And to some extent, it's fun to watch those people now that they aren't enjoying their game, right? And it's like, aha, now you know.
Well, also,
exactly.
I mean, also
you see posts on the PoE subreddit where it's like, I'm gonna go play Diablo now, and you're like, ha.
I mean, I think most game companies like make similar decisions, like they chose to like everyone's calling it early access. Bro, they released PoE 2. There's a reason they made millions and millions and millions of dollars by releasing an unfinished game, like every other game has done for the past 6 years, instead of just releasing it free to play, because they know they'd make infinite money. It's a business decision, right? But like they just get like the goodwill of the community. People like glorify. I just think a lot of Japanese developers are glorified like this, but I think in NA certainly GGG is glorified in that way, where I think if you glorify a game company or developers, you're asking yourself to get let down, because I think a lot of them are very similar.
So,
well, I mean,
they have been more transparent and honest about this delay structure than a lot of game companies, I think, would be.
Yeah,
in this spot, like the way they announced this was,
so they get
basically like they were
because they're being honest about it, but the result is the same. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's like it still sucks, and it's one of those spots where they really should have been able to see this cut. Like, it does not take a PhD.
I mean, if you're running the game, if you're running the game and you're like, we're putting all of our devs from one game onto the second. Right. I think maybe one of their biggest errors, and I don't know if this will be an error, I think only time will tell, is making PoE 2, I think even calling it PoE 2 is a mistake. Because that almost implies it's a better version of PoE 1, or it's supposed to be the new version of PoE 1. But PoE 1 was kind of this thing that they've built that was like infinitely repeatable in a way, just with small alterations. They had kind of figured it out, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of making a newer version of that, they chose to really, really depart from that kind of gameplay. And clearly a lot of people in PoE 1 are just like, I'm not interested in this, right?
I think it's like reason, like they basically were like, okay, we can make the best game of all time. Like, we've learned so much from PoE 1. Yeah. We have all these ideas for like things that we would do differently if we could do it again. Like, we're going to do that. And I think they're a lot of the way there with PoE 2, but obviously they're not like all the way there yet, right? Like, yeah, there are a lot of different people will have different diagnoses for things that are holding it back, right? But like, it's not there yet. It reminds me of like when we had StarCraft Brood War, right? And then StarCraft 2 came out, and everybody was like, this is less fun than Brood War, right? And then that sort of was true forever for StarCraft 2 versus Brood War, but the hope is that eventually the 2 becomes better than the 1, even for the people who currently prefer the 1, right? But like, it's not true right away, and what is true right away is that 2's existence has certainly griefed the timeline for PoE 1's releases. Like, it's cost us at least 3 leagues at this point, just cumulatively, and that's like a lot of content that has. I think it will probably, like, I think that a lot of the people who currently prefer PoE 1 to PoE 2 will eventually prefer PoE 2 to PoE 1. Like, I do think that I think that there's a set of people that are just never going to prefer it, but I really do think that PoE 2 is like, they've got something there. But
yeah, we got good.
I wonder.
Yeah,
maybe it's just an ARPG thing. Maybe ARPG is a game so built on replayability rather than first-time playability. At least for a lot of the hardcore players, I think for some players, it's like you want to go in and see the story, just like every other RPG, and you're like,
right,
now I've seen this, and now the game is. It might still be a good game, but it's not like what I came here for. But there's a lot of players, PoE-specific players, it's much about the replayable gameplay. Like, the first time you go through the campaign is nothing. It's infinite replayability after that, right? Those games, I wonder, like, if just sequels of those games will always take many, many years to be better than their predecessor just because of that alone. Like, the other game just has so many season mechanics it can just add and keep the good ones and get rid of the bad ones. You're seeing active game design in real time. You're seeing good ideas fail or succeed, and then it just adds to the game. And I wonder if, like, is there an example of an ARPG, a successful ARPG releasing a 2 or a 3 or a 4, and the new version just, no matter how good the previous game was, being better than the old version right away, or being perceived as that? I don't think it's ever happened.
I don't think so either.
And maybe that's by design.
Well, it depends. Like, Diablo 2 is
Diablo 2
clearly
is the
superior
example.
to Diablo 1. And then for some people, Diablo 3 is better than 2.
Yeah, but it took a long time. I love Diablo 2. I love Diablo 3. Diablo 3, like the last like couple years before Diablo 4, those seasons slapped. Right away, though, no shot. It was the game didn't even really know what it wanted to be, Diablo 3, right away. It was in the middle of so many different things. But Diablo 3 for me was way better than 2 after a while, if you can look past nostalgia. But like, and maybe D4. Actually, I think current D4, like some of the recent D4 seasons have been very comparable to everything that D3 has done, honestly. But it was, not that way when it first came out. So, like, D3 definitely still a better game. I just wonder if it's an ARPG thing.
It's also, this reminds me very much of Paradox games are also like this. I don't know if you guys ever play these like Crusader Kings and
no,
those sorts of like the map games where those games, when they come out, are so like threadbare. And then over the next 10 years, they do like a DLC for each different part of the world or whatever. And then it's actually got a bunch of content. And the games are like Victoria 3 and Crusader Kings 3 both launched and were pretty unpopular. And then like 2 years later, they were good. And now they're like quite good. Like they ramp up over time as they actually get more content. But like on initial release they're like always worse than the predecessors.
That kind of makes me think. I wonder if this line of thinking also has why WoW has never seriously considered doing WoW 2.
Because I was thinking that earlier. Is like this entire discussion. If you're listening to this and you're only a WoW player and you hear people talk about like when is WoW 2, like if I was Blizzard, I'd be looking at it and I'd be like, there is a very good chance. Because like why like there's so many people who want so many different things, and they're not going to give you like a 2004 game in Classic, right? They're going to who no matter what they make, a way better version of retail or a way better version of Classic, a ton of people are going to hate it because so many people want so many different things from World of Warcraft that it'll probably never equal what the either version of the game they currently play is giving them. So it's like kind of like just a dead proposal. It's just not, no one's gonna be happy. It'll be the most hype thing ever. Like it would probably break viewership records on Twitch. It would be the biggest game for a while, and I think people would be extremely hyped for it, and they would also hate the fuck out of it. It would be extremely negative. In a way, the hype is like part of the death sentence as well with these sequels, right? Where it's like, because it's got that much hype, it's never going to live up to it.
Yeah, very expecting it to be as good as the first.
1 out of 100 chance that it's actually like Diablo 2 relative to Diablo 1, right? But like that like almost never happens. Yeah.
Well, so if you ask me, I think retail is WoW 2 right now. Because
I think that's fair.
We've made that argument on this podcast.
It's like the ship of Theseus, right? Where you guys know this what is paradox, I guess historically, but it's like, okay, if you have a ship, and then over the years you replace every part of the ship, and now it's like none of the wood is from the original ship now, right? But it's been on at sea for 300 years, right? And you've been slowly replacing it. Is that the same ship? Right? At what point did it stop being the first ship and become a new ship?
Yeah, it's like it has the spirit of the ship, but it's literally a new ship.
Every single piece is now new compared to the old, and that's WoW, right? Like if you look at WoW, but like each of the changes was done slowly, and then the corollary is if you took all the old wood from the first version of the ship and built that, like, is that the real one now? And that's what they did with WoW Classic, which is kind of funny.
Yeah. So going back to the whole like the sequel and the prequel, whatever. What makes, like, going back to my original point, what makes PoE 1 players so insufferable is they're essentially classic players, right? Like they're literally classic players. I mean, I get it, right? Like it happens with every game. The people who enjoy the original will always be more vitriolic compared to the people who are just, playing.
What do you mean by that? Right? Well, I mean, you literally mean vitriolic, like abrasive about it, like
yeah, you know how like classic players are always like, oh, like
they're very abrasive. Classic players are hella abrasive. Yeah, you don't see a lot of retail players being like, fuck classic. Like classic has this like I hate retail in their heart thing. Yeah,
I think it has.
It makes sense
with,
why
like,
it's because
you're perceived as the winners, right? Like you're.
No, it's not just
player. That. You're like the. You know, the game is moving in your direction. You're the future. They're the past, right? And like the past, people that are the past are always clinging to it, right? And are more hateful.
I think it just depends on who the devs are favoring. So, like, if you look at OSRS and RuneScape, right? Like, obviously, they're working more on OSRS, so they're kind of the child that's being pampered to. Whereas, with retail and Classic, the devs don't have, like, abandoned Classic for a very long time now. I mean, like, they've recently come back with SOD and all that, but retail is Blizzard's baby right now, and a lot of players just don't like that. They're like, not happy that they're just, like, working on retail instead of like working on our Classic, and it's the sort of same with.
They have like a different. They have a different team working on. They literally made Season of Discovery.
They do, sure, but I mean, like if we were to like compare how much they're putting into development on retail versus Classic, it's like incomparable, right?
Well, I mean, I mean, by default, it's going to be like more on retail because you're creating new assets rather than like refining and re-releasing old ones.
Well, but that's the thing. It's not with RuneScape. Is what I'm trying to get at. Like with RuneScape, they're working on OSRS and not on the main game. At least that's how I understand it. Like I don't play RuneScape.
I could be totally wrong, but I feel like if they made new Classic content, I think people would fucking hate it. Because
maybe, but like the point is like
what they like about Classic is like the community and like what it used and kind of the feeling of what it was like to be a kid. And new WoW content doesn't bring you that.
I mean, SOD's done like 10 new dungeons now, right?
Yeah, but SOD's unbelievably dead.
Right, exactly.
Like no one cares, right? They want to do this hard. They're into like the streamer drama, which by the way has been massively successful, super good.
Oh yeah.
But like that's what carries it. It's not the actual yeah, that's why I'm really interested. I would love to hear like a internal Blizzard meeting right now about like where Classic goes from here and what they have planned, because I don't think about this a lot, honestly. I don't really pay attention to Classic, but I just have no clue what the fuck they should do, because a lot of the stuff that's successful is just run by the community anyway, you know?
Well, yeah, I think it's more about that's kind of a different topic, but I think that's more about like just like having more content for the players to have social interactions amongst. But like going back to the more PoE side of things, PoE 1 is essentially losing all of its devs, and they're all working on PoE 2, right? Like that's why the PoE 1 players are mad. But what makes it so dumb is PoE built an insane amount of goodwill with their community. Am I wrong about this, Stratos? Because
no, that's obviously.
I swear to God, like PoE 1 players are the most fanatical players I've ever seen in any gaming community. Like they are the ones who will be
way up there.
I feel like it's worse in PoE, honestly. Like these are the guys who will be like, oh, Diablo bad, D4 bad, PoE is the best game ever made. And I've heard so many.
The PoE Reddit has like always
like,
been
the best game
kind
ever.
of critical of there's especially like 10 leagues ago now or something, 60 leagues ago, they did like a overhaul that made the game less rewarding that people really didn't like. And so there have been other things that have eroded community goodwill in the past, but I would say that like compared to most games, especially games of that size, I think that it's had a pretty good community goodwill. I think it still does. The Reddit has been sort of an exception. The PoE subreddit has always been like way more toxic than PoE discussion on X, the Everything app, or wherever else.
I hate that you do that. Keep going. It gets me every time.
Yeah, I don't know. I empathize with. I think you're absolutely right as well, Dorki. Where it's like it's a thing of seeing the other mode getting the attention when you're not getting the attention, right? Like you're seeing your brother get your parents play with your brother and not you, and you start throwing your little tantrum. I do think that in the case of PoE 1, it's like there were definitely like some big communication blunders that were made by GGG.
I mean, I felt like GGG was pretty transparent about it, but I get like they fucked up, right?
Transparency only goes so far. Like I don't know. I think transparency actually low key is like super overrated. Like you want it and you want to feel like they're more real or whatever, but like the reality is like what you do is what you do, right? Like whether they continually explained, they continue to explain why they messed up or why they did what they did, or letting you know ahead of time that something's gonna be it. Like I guess it comes across as more human. But it's like it's really, if you're looking at it on a very binary level, it's what kind of content are you putting out and how are you treating your community and fixing things, and like that's all that matters. At least
I think as well. Like I'm much more willing to like extend some goodwill to a good, like if they're like, oh, we screwed up because we didn't realize that implementing this specific system was going to be a 3-month project instead of a 1-month project because we'd never done it before. Like, that's the sort of explanation where if I see a company make one of those, I'm always like, okay, that's fair, right? But in this case, it seems like their explanation is just so flimsy, where it's like, you're really telling me that you couldn't have foreseen this set of, that your set of decisions was going to lead to this happening? And, I mean, I guess I'm glad that they didn't lie about it, but it doesn't help much with feeling like, clearly they probably did know that deep down, and it obviously wasn't a priority for them.
It's maybe not indicative of the whole company. It can be it can be a few executives or the leader making a bad decision and letting something fall, or just a miscommunication at a high level between two different people that are in charge of big groups of people.
I do think the good news for GGG as well is that like PoE 1 is actually very easy for them to make like a low effort short term event for, and if they just did that, I think they would recoup a lot of goodwill. Like they've done like endless delve mode before, and they could just bring back something like that and have that be out for the next 2 months on PoE 1, and like you do something like that, and I think that would fix a lot of this the like angst that's currently being felt by the PoE1
I think
community.
that's kind of short term, because I think in the long term, what they're doing is telling you what's important to them.
Mm-hmm.
It is extremely important that they get as many or all of these PoE1 heads to be PoE2 heads as soon as possible, so they can focus all of their development into one resource rather than splitting it between two. That is like obviously what they need to do, and by spending, so that they're taking a hit right now in the short term of making the PoE1 people mad, and they're really hoping all that work on PoE2 is going to make them love it.
I think the problem as well is that they are looking to move towards a future where you have some people on PoE1 and you have some people on PoE2, right? Like working on each of them. And what they've realized is that like right now they need everybody working on PoE2 because there's a lot that they need to do. And I don't know when that's actually going to stop being true. Like, is it really going to be true that they're going to look at it and be like, yeah, we can take half of our devs off of this and put them back on PoE1 in a couple of months? Like, I don't actually know if that's going to be true. Looking at the state of PoE2, I kind of think it's going to have like, it's going to want as many devs as possible working on it for years.
Yeah, exactly. So if I'm running through this exact scenario, one thing they didn't tell you that they're talking about internally that they're not going to announce to the public is they're fucking hiring. Because they're realizing that they need to either, well, they don't want to hire PoE1 people. You would definitely have people who are experienced with PoE1 work on PoE1, and they would hire PoE2 developers. But you better, and also it helps that they just made like the most fucking money ever. So
the hard part is they're New Zealand based, and
right,
they only recruit people from around the oceanic area, so that's their massive struggle at the moment.
They've already got all the programmers from New Zealand, right? Like,
they don't have much to pick from.
This is totally a real thing. I'm not even saying like they might have everyone from New Zealand. All I'm saying is, like, I've talked to this with WoW people. I'm just like, here seems like an interesting thing to me. You guys are a huge company. You have infinite money, right? You're owned by Microsoft. Clearly, with the way things come out and how ready they are in time, to me, it shows as a lack of like total amount of people working on this. And why wouldn't you hire more? Hire twice the amount of class designers, and now you have class updates much more often, and hire more fight designers and stuff. And the quick answer I was given while someone was laughing is, you have no idea how hard it is to find someone you can hire to design a raid fight for you. Those people are like, who the fuck knows how to do that? Like, that's like extremely rare. Like, it's not like you just hire someone with a game design degree and you're just like, do this. They'll have no fucking, they might be horrible at it, right? It's like so specific. Same thing with like, if you're a class designer, you'd have to have such a deep and long history and experience of dealing with this kind of stuff in game and understanding these classes to do that, to where basically the result of what I'm saying is these people are not just out there there's not a list of these people to hire that they're choosing not to do to save money. It's more like finding the right person that would actually be an impact to your company is really, really hard.
I suspect in a lot of cases it's like somebody who's worked on WoW for 5 years gets shifted into the role of fight designer, right? Like, that's
correct.
I think often gonna end up being the path.
Not to be that guy though, but have you guys seen that recruitment post where they're looking for someone to work on classic QA, and they're trying to pay them $16 to $30 an hour, and they have to be working in Irvine, California?
Oh, I mean, QA is a very low level position.
I mean, it is a low level position, but I mean, that is.
I mean, yeah,
it is also true that companies do, cut costs.
Yeah,
and
companies,
save money, right?
yeah, companies will give you a job and they'll leverage your passion. The esports community has done this a lot. Like, esports companies pay a lot less per position than like video game publishers, mostly because they have nowhere near the amount of money, but also because like they kind of leverage the passion people have for esports and want to be a part of it. Like a company like Blizzard, you want to be a game designer? Okay, they have the ability to be like, okay, show up here and be QA for us for a couple years and work this job and live with 5 roommates and stuff like that. That's been like that forever. That's more indicative of the industry. I don't think that's like, I mean, you could make the argument that companies are always exploiting people, but yeah. Also, $30 an hour is kind of nice.
That's at most, but also California? they have to be
you have to be local
Irvine, California.
Which,
so
yeah, I wonder why they wouldn't be able to make a QA job remote too.
Yeah, Blizzard like scaled back their remoteness. I remember that was like a big
during the whole
a while ago.
I believe.
Yeah, whereas
that was a while ago. Yeah, so they did like the COVID thing. Everyone worked from home, and then they did the same thing most big companies do, where I think they're there 3 days a week. And
yeah, but like you have to live in Irvine now again. Like, you can't just be full-time remote, which
I mean, yeah, you're gonna get a lot less people applying for your job. That's for sure. The people have been shown the way of the remote work. A lot of people feel very strongly about committing to that.
Yeah, it strikes me as like, executives are making a blunder when they don't allow at least like certain. You make like there, especially in a space like game design, it seems like there are probably some really high skilled people you could have if you let them work from home full time that you're just missing out on if you have this policy.
Depends on the person. I mean,
Yeah.
I can see companies wanting to avoid it entirely because you're like, I know that some people are bad with it. So
Right.
like I'm taking a risk by hiring anyone remote. But you like I think any one of those companies, if they knew this, would take a great employee working remotely over a less good employee that would have to show up to work. But you just don't know that. Like I've actually personally lived with people either in the past like 5 or 6 years, either roommates or like exes or anything, that some of which were really good at working remotely, and some of which I saw people that were like, if I hired this person, I would be really unhappy with
Right.
them working at my company because like they're not fucking doing anything, right?
Yeah.
They're mailing it in. You can kind of more or less control that better in a work environment, at least to my. So like I understand why they do it, but also like, especially in California, bro. Like living in California is very expensive. You could like live in, I don't know, fucking Montana or something, and then just like work at a California place, get California wages and benefits, and live in Montana. Probably just live in like a $200 hut or something. You're just $200.
Wow, a luxury hut. Yeah.
A luxury hut. Yeah. Then you'd be fucking stacking money. Live with
Hell
your
yeah.
parents. Fuck it. As long as you can.
I mean, is it really that hard for them to just pay them more? Like, yeah, I get it. It's the industry standard, but they're fucking Blizzard, you know? They are the cutting edge game development company.
That's
Like,
not true.
Surely these guys, are they not? I mean,
I think
billions.
at least within the industry, at least Riot is certainly a place that like.
Okay, but they're definitely up there.
But
I mean,
QA in
their
particular,
Brutasaur
like-
mounts made them $15 million or load.
I mean,
so.
Riot,
Yeah, but-
Riot also pays like, I'm just gonna make this up, but like 20-30% more for same positions too.
Like if you're a manager or whatever, and you go in front of your boss and you're like, I have a plan. I'm gonna pay more money than I have to get my QA testers.
Well, I mean, not necessarily, because we were, the whole discussion was they're lacking talent, right? Like, what was
Right,
the
but-
original discussion?
Well, there's two. Okay, so first of all, QA tester and raid designer, we were not talking about the same things. Just
Yeah,
to be
yeah,
clear.
but
And
I'm
this is
just saying, like,
And
QA.
yeah, exactly. Like their QA tester is an important role, but
Yeah.
like it's very clearly true that you can get somebody who's like 80% as good as a really good QA tester at half
And
the
hire
price or
them,
whatever, and like that
and
companies
hire
will
them
make that trade off.
and they'll make that trade off. But like,
Yeah, 100% of the
Blizzard,
time.
but Blizzard like literally doesn't have fight designers to hire. They don't
Right.
exist, right? So it'd be more two positions. But yeah, like Dranos has a good point. Like why don't they just pay him more? You have infinite money, but you're the manager for that, and you're just like, okay, I have an idea, and you're like up for a promotion maybe, and you're just like, so I want to actually get the same amount of QA people, but I just want to pay them all much more. And it's like, okay, great, but like, why? Right? And then it's like, are we going to get 50% more like production and value out of paying them 50% more? Like, no, it would be like nicer. They, like if they can get away, if these companies can get away with it, they get. Microsoft is as corporate as it gets, right? The decisions that are made in a way like that are very binary. They're very black and white.
Well, I feel like we're a little bit more fixated on the QA part. I mean more along the lines of they just need more talent, and it could just be whether it's like, recruiting someone who's
I mean,
worked
I'm a
at
fan.
Blizzard,
Hey,
and
I think as well, like for long-term growth, there's an argument for doing that. And I think that one of the tremendous flaws of capitalism is that the incentive structure favors short-term decision-making over long-term decision-making in a lot of cases.
exactly.
And this is definitely one of the issues, is that if you are that manager and you go and you say, hey, we should foster like a really healthy long-term company by paying everybody more so that we keep them for longer.
You might be making the right decision in the long term, and you might tank
that's
your
going to
stock
realize
price.
benefits in 10 years or whatever, but your boss doesn't want you to do that because they are trying to get promoted as well and bring it in front of the board or whatever.
And not have the
had
stock
good
price
quarter over quarter.
and not having the stock price temporarily tank, right?
Yeah.
Or something like that, in which you could instantly lose your job. Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. Yeah, but also, I mean, just be clear, Dorki. I'm a fan of that. We're out here trying to explain why capitalism happens. But if you're asking me, should the billion-dollar company Blizzard and Microsoft should they spend way more money and invest way more money and time and people into World of Warcraft? You know what? God damn it, that sounds fucking amazing. That sounds. I am pro that. We are all pro that. It's just that it's also not going to happen. Most likely.
Yeah, it just feels more like they kind of run it down. And
I mean, do we really know how much they're even like? I feel like we're all just kind of making this up.
We definitely are making this shit up, but I mean, there are just a lot of speculations. Like, we've seen a lot of talents from Blizzard who are leaving. Like, most recently, there's the Diablo 4 class dev guy that left, and he was heavily, what's the word?
Praised?
Yeah, he was heavily praised amongst the community. And they also lost, like, Kirby. Kirby was doing a great job. There's been a lot of...
Yeah, you want to know why? Because Riot's paying more money.
Exactly. That's kind of the point I'm making.
If you're going title for title to Blizzard to Riot, you're making 30 or 40K more a year.
Got to get more Brutosaurs out there so that we can, because like,
yeah,
let me tell you,
get more Brutosaurs out there.
A Brutosaur for $90 or whatever, they're making Faker Ari skins for $500 at Riot. Like, we gotta up our game here. Max, you gotta talk Blizzard and see if you can get like a Hall of Legends max signature Brutosaur for $500.
That would be fucking hype.
Yeah,
I would love that. That would be good. People would love that.
Dude, they're 100% doing more expensive.
This is super random, by the way. When you said that there was a really well-liked dev that went to Riot, and you were like, people were upset about it, what do you guys think devs would rather have? Like, a parasocial relationship where people love them when you're at your company, but fucking hate you when you leave? Or what it is now, where they don't know anything about you, but fucking hate you when you're here, and they don't care when you leave? Which one do you think, if you had to choose between both of those completely unhealthy, toxic relationships, which one do you think they would want?
Probably the one that doesn't involve the death threats and stuff.
I think those are happening either way.
Okay.
It's just whether you're at the company or after you leave.
Yeah.
Those are happening no matter what in this scenario, and they currently do, so...
I don't mind some parasocials.
Dude,
they can have their benefits.
I love parasocial relationships.
Yeah.
Nope.
All right, what do we got? We got a little Patreon.
We do. We have a lovely Patreon question this week. Maybe I haven't read it yet. We'll see. This one comes from AUYL. I'm assuming that's like all. I don't know. It says good luck as well with the pronunciation.
Okay.
Oily, you think?
Well, yeah. How would you pronounce that? Oil? I think it is a fancy way of saying oil. It's not all. If it's all, like, what are you even doing here?
It's sort of similar to like a Scottish or Celtic or whatever.
Well, it says good luck. Is that a Scottish or Celtic way of saying good luck?
No, I think they're saying. I think they're wishing us good luck with pronunciation of the name.
I'm googling it.
All right, let's see. AUYL.
Pronounce.
Oh, it's a political party in Kazakhstan.
Oh my fucking god! How do you pronounce it?
It's owl.
It's owl. It's owl.
Owl?
Like owl. I think.
Owl.
I mean, according to this fucking howtopronounce.com, it is pronounced owl.
Hell yeah!
It's more like owl.
It's owl. I'm literally listening to it right now. Owl. Owl. That's how they keep saying it. Anyways, let's fucking do the Patreon question. Sorry.
Hell yeah. Okay, so the question is, Poddy High, Fratnos, Porky, and the gang. So what do you guys think would be a good format for having a shared raid going for the top 10 get? Haha, you really thought I was going there. Good job choosing this question.
I was about to get mad. I didn't even pre-read it.
Now, my actual question now. With story mode being something new for War Within, do you think Blizzard might or would add something like a practice mode? Kind of like the old training grounds where you choose a boss, get put in a scenario where you get to practice that boss's mechanics. Could be that you pick a specific mechanic or the entire fight and you choose difficulty. Obviously, this will be released for Mythic first after the race or maybe after Hall of Fame. Poddy B.
That was actually my idea.
I don't think that story mode getting introduced in any way has made this more likely to happen.
Yeah.
Like, you've actually done story mode. There is no amount of, like, mechanical intensity whatsoever.
I mean, I kind of do wonder if, like, before you could ever queue up for, like, heroic of a raid in the group finder, you had to pass this mandatory test where, like, on Queen Ansarek, it just, like, this is how the, like, toxins work and like, not, like, everything, but, like, just general things that really help you. I wonder if that would be good.
There was a time in WoD where you had to get Proving Grounds something to queue for something, right? Like queue for LFR.
Oh yeah, so they've tried this. You're right. I think it was a MOP, actually.
MOP, yeah. It was like you had to get Proving Grounds of some kind to be able to queue for some content. And
that made people very mad.
Yeah, nor did it especially prepare people for that content.
Yeah, because it's like super unique,
is pretty
like
different,
CCing mobs and shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is like way more
practice
specific.
Mode is like, is practice mode fun for the people that actually would really benefit from it?
Okay, but I mean, it would be more fun than watching a fucking video.
Purely gameplay, I think there's a version of this that's really nice. I think Blizzard is probably super fixated on getting players to all come together and play as one and learn together as a group. This is the MMO way. But the reality is that, like, people just have crazy anxiety if they feel like they're going to mess up at all and they don't want to participate because of that. So, like, and then also someone could yell at them, and that's great. So there's definitely a world where this makes sense. I'm sure they had to have thought about it. Not to mention 10 years ago, they literally did this, but not this. Or at least they've had this thought before. So kind of a good idea.
Yeah. Like, I think it definitely has some clear upsides for a lot of people, but this strikes me as one of those, like, Blizzard will never, ever do this.
Yep, same.
Suggestions.
Actually,
okay, but I mean,
I think
it's
it's more. I think it's more on the they might do this more than, like, when we normally say that. It's like there's no fucking way they'd ever do this. But I could see there being, like, an actual, like, tangible reason,
like an outside shot.
Yeah, I think there's an outside shot they could do it. They could do it after listening to this podcast.
Look, remember when they said they would never do swirlies that are hard outlined?
True.
Well, I mean, here we are.
Did they say that?
Well, they would always be like, we've got to prioritize, the...
I don't think, Dorki, I think you just made that up.
I made it up, but I mean, they've definitely mentioned how... they've definitely said before in interviews about, like, how, like, something with, like, theme and it has to, look a certain... Because, it's been brought up many times, right? You know how people talk about the raid in... during BFA, one of those raids with, like, purple on purple.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you don't talk about it. Yeah, it's been brought up multiple times.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and they were always
specifically. It's more just like, I mean, the thing is the WoW swirly never really looked like the raid fights anyway. It was just like this nondescript swirl thing that was not easy to tell, and they can even make it more thematic to the fight now. Like, look at that second boss, Cauldron of Carnage, right? There's, like, these very bright red and bright blue things. Although it is funny, if they keep going down that same design philosophy, you do actually just end up with telegraphs, which I wonder how close, if you, like, just, like, randomly fast forward 5 years into the future, a lot of other things change, but I wonder how far they go down that design philosophy with the well-defined edges and see what that turns into.
But yeah, I mean, I think the point is there is a possibility. I don't think it's completely out of question. Like, maybe old Blizzard would have said, hell no, this is never happening, but I think there's a chance. And also, I think this would be great to have, just because, like, me personally, I do much better when I see the mechanic in action. Because, I mean, I would say most players that raid nowadays probably watch a video or, like, read up some guide, or they're, like, reading the journal before they're actually doing the encounter. And if that's the case, why not just let the players try the mechanic before actually doing the boss? Like, it doesn't have to give you the entire boss fight. It just has to be like, all right, so the Silken Court bomb mechanic, right? Like, they could just show that mechanic once, where it's like, all right, there's a bomb, and then when players stand in it, they get connected with a web, and you just get an idea of, like, what it looks like.
Yeah, I think it would definitely be nice. There's definitely a lot of people that would benefit from this existing. I still just, my personal gut read on it is that it's not something they would ever do, but
no, you're probably right. Yeah, they're probably never gonna do something like this.
Yeah, it would be cool. It'd be very useful. I do think that I guess the biggest risk with it would be if it was like, okay, you're joining a progression guild now, and you're expected to come prepared to do every mechanic and raid now, and have spent 8 hours in the practice tool on, then that would maybe be less fun. But
that's the thing, though. Like, they already do. They already require you to watch videos.
Yeah, but even then, it's like there's sort of an understanding that, like, some people have to do it to learn it, right? And, like, you still have your first few pulls where everything goes wrong, and I don't know. I think there's a small risk of that making the game less fun, but I do think probably what would happen is just that some people would use it and would benefit from it, and other people wouldn't use it, and it would be fine. So yeah, I would be in favor of them trying it. I just don't think they ever would. All right. We got anything else?
Is there any classic drama to catch up on?
There's been a ton of classic stuff happening, but before
Only
that,
Fangs is, like, drafting for Molten Core raid
content.
or
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so before that, I wanted to ask you guys about the raid because I was gonna ask you guys last week, but
dude,
now
there was
that
the Plunderstorm ending drama as well. The end of the Plunderstorm Creative Royale.
Oh yeah.
yeah, we can talk about that too.
was-
Yeah, where Max's team they kind of cheated and
Yeah,
went
Max
to the top,
invented a
yeah.
cheat, and then Echo used the cheat, and
Yeah.
you know the blatant exploiting in front of millions, and good times. Yeah.
Yeah, I was also farming Max's team. That was also pretty good. I
Bro,
killed
we were
Max
so far ahead of
once
you,
or
it's
twice
insane.
and killed True. Okay, but I got so many kills. All right, I don't even want to
So
hear
did
it.
I. Bro, I had fucking
No,
I had like 8 or 9 kills in our win. Get mad.
Yeah, well, I had way more kills than you.
That's not true.
Okay.
It is true, dude. Check the leaderboard. I had like amongst the top kills. Even the dev that I was playing with said that. He was like, "Yo, did you know, by the way, you had like the third most kills?" And I'm like,
You
"That's
just
right,
landed
that's me."
lucky.
Nah. We actually got really unlucky. Our placement points.
People were
terrible.
fucking so mad about the Genji thing. It was crazy. Here's how mad people were. I even had a tweet saying, so mainly the people that were mad were people that were like defending Genji. They're like, why is everyone mad and saying Genji didn't deserve to win? He just did something everyone else would do, and they're right. So they were like coming at me and they're like, yeah, because I just said what was true. And I'm like, we didn't know about like spots where lightning didn't spawn. The only reason people are assuming that is because Trill was just on this spot because he jumped out of the gas looking for a spot to heal, and then like Genji found that spot and then stayed there. And then like they're implying like, oh yeah, well, Genji cheated. Well, you guys all would have fucking cheated too because Trill was there minutes before lightning spawned. And then I even said I absolved Genji of guilt. I said anyone in their right mind in that scenario stays there. Anyone. There's $25,000 on the. You're gonna absolutely fucking do that. You're crazy for not thinking so. And even then, people were like nitpicking what I said. They're like, you sure you didn't know about the lightning? Because check this clip. And it's just completely irrelevant. Just like the clip would just be like of us on a game multiple days ago where we were also on a high surface and lightning wasn't even out yet. Just completely irrelevant. Just not being on the ground. Like, oh yeah, you knew lightning didn't spawn? Here's a clip of you not being on the ground in Plunderstorm. It's like, this isn't relevant. And it's like, even then, why would you feel like you had to point out that we were apparently lying about not knowing about the lightning when I already said we would have done the same thing Genji did? We would have stayed in that spot too. So like, where's the psychology in like, yeah, I know you're saying that, but like, still, bro, you knew about it. Why?
Yeah, I mean, I think the drama got way more out of control this time around because this is like the first time Genji is doing something against the PvPers, the unknown side. If this is their first time, well, like for the fans at least, it's the first time seeing them interacting with like, Zaryu and Peekaboo, who are absolutely massive creators, and Sidu and Mez, and we're not used to seeing this. Like we're used to seeing Max versus Genji, like Andu in drama or whatever drama it may be.
Plague Borers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like that's just like something we're used to, right? It's like, it's just classic Genji. But like this time, it's like, all right, now we've got.
Well, also he just recently had the classic cheating thing happen. So like a lot of the classic viewers, which were a lot of Zaryu and Peekaboo's viewers, were like mad about that, right? Or maybe that's their only context they know of him. Right, so like, oh, this fucking guy again, right?
And leading the charge against the Splinterstorm fired up incident in Palace as well. So it's got that little, hypocrisy angle potentially that that always triggers people on the internet, especially.
Yeah, so
but I think also just a lot more people are unaware of Genji, but now they're like, all right, it's fucking.
Well,
guy.
I just think...
and again, like to be clear. This was not cheating in the slightest. It was clearly like every single person would have done that spot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But also the reason why like the drama happened was because everyone's point was right. So if you're Genji and you're like, why are people mad at me? I would have done the same thing everyone else. He's right. That is true. But also, if you're Sidu and Mess and you have a 2v1 at the end of the game and the person you're fighting happens to have lucked into a spot where no lightning is spawning and you just die slowly over minutes to lightning, that also fucking sucks. You feeling like you got cheated, maybe not by Genji, but the game or just on luck or whatever, you're right. That happened. So like,
and if you're a viewer and you're looking at it and you're like, this was a bullshit way for the tournament to end, you're also right.
You're also right. Yeah, because
the problem is that a lot of people direct that anger at Gingy when he doesn't
I mean,
deserve
the same thing happened
right?
last time, so it's bound to happen. I said this before the tournament, but like this is going to happen every time because Pika and Zaryu have more than half of the viewers watching this entire tournament, watching just their streams. So if they don't win, by default, everyone's fucking mad, right? So the same thing happened in the last two tournaments. They were in first, we were in second, and then a team that wasn't in first or second randomly won, and then they got second and we got third. Same thing happened in both times. And then last time, people were mad at that other team because they're like, who the fuck are these guys? Like, why did they win? And now it's like Gingy did it on top of the exploit thing. So even if Gingy didn't exploit, by the way, everyone's still mad because they didn't play. Clearly, Zara and Pika played the best in both tournaments. There's no question about that. So like, but that's not how the tournament is designed, right? It's a meme for fun creator tournament. So, but also everyone's mad. So this is what it is.
That is something I wanted to bring up to you. It's become so normalized in Blizzard competitions where it's like, I don't want to say like cheating necessarily, but in every single competitive part of WoW, whether it's Race the World First, MDI, TGP, AWC, or even Plunderstorm now, there seems to be some level of normalization of like, doing exploits or trying to capitalize on some unintended mechanic. So I wonder like how bad that looks for Blizzard and like if they will ever do something about it.
I mean, the Plunderstorm thing is just like you would have had to make sure there's no spots in the game where lightning doesn't randomly spawn. That's like a Blizzard problem. Yeah, you're basically like this either just happens a lot to Blizzard or we're so close to Blizzard that we notice all of it, or that there's like little bugs and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure every time that happens, they're like, well, that was not ideal. I would have rather that not happened, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a game like League where you can just pause as soon as there might be a bug, right? And then have people have the game state get corrected or whatever, right? Like, it's
an old ass game
it's an
too.
MMO. It's like old that sort of capability is not realistic. Could there be a system where like the meta is that you're not allowed to do anything that's anywhere close to a gray area?
Yeah, but then it's like, how do you determine that line?
Right.
Exactly. It turns out you'd be in the same position we're at now, where the line...
It would be worse.
Where the line...
It would be worse because it would be a lot less consistent.
Yeah, exactly. The line constantly moves by what's allowed and what isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's all a mess. W. What about... okay, classic drama. So we did Plunderstorm drama.
There's been so much shit happening.
Give us the fucking lowdown.
Also, you guys never answered what I was going to say about raid. I was going to ask you guys about what the raids are like.
We never answered something you didn't even ask us?
I did. I was asking before.
We were busy talking over you, man.
Oh, yeah, it's fine though. Yeah. But whatever. We'll leave it for later. But yeah.
Okay, now you're not going to punish us? Yeah, fucking ask the question.
It's whatever.
Oh, you're mad?
Okay, fine. All right. No, I'm not mad. All right. So.
Okay.
What I was going to ask is, all right, now that there's been a week of Mythic testing, I wanted to ask you guys last week.
How good the raid is. Dude, he did ask us that. We totally just fucking...
You also just talked over him again. Right? Like, literally the end of the sentence.
It's fine. Try again, Dorki.
Okay. I just wanted to know...
Yeah, so about the raid?
Yeah. If you guys... I don't know, like what are the overall impressions on like the mechanical difficulties and all that? Because that seems to be a concern amongst the Mythic raiding community for
it's a
like
fair
the past
concern.
few weeks. Yeah, I mean it's been talked about.
We just had two really hard raids in a row, right? Like two of the all-time pull counts. Is it ever in a row, back to back?
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. I mean, like the reason there's a concern is people are wondering if it's a trend. So I was talking about this. Dranos and I actually just before this recorded rating the bosses based on their design thing. We did some pull count predictions, and although those are like completely made up, just pointing out the last two, there have been like this is WoW. If WoW history repeats itself, there have been multiple really hard raids in a row, and then Blizzard will go back like a pendulum. Like very rarely has there been like these raids were super fucking hard, and now this is normal. It usually always swings back to normal, right? But you always question that when you're in the middle of it because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. So you're like, is this going to happen? Do you know from raid design, Dranos, if it looks like they're like clearly taking a step back in mechanical difficulty? I don't know if you could say that.
I don't think so. Yeah, it doesn't seem clear to me whether the difficulty is going to go up or down this tier. I will say the mid-tier complexity is definitely higher than this tier, like the early mid tier, right? Like the Rashanan and Sikran spot in the raid is almost certainly going to be less puggable and more complex. But in terms of like difficulty pull count for cutting edge guilds, I have no basis to make that judgment one way or the other.
Yeah, because like the pull counts like overall for how it is for someone who's mythic plussing primarily and doing raid on the side and just trying to clear, get cutting edge, whatever. Like that is so heavily dependent on your Nexus princesses and your Silken Courts and your Anserex or One-Armed Bandit, Mugsy, and Gallywix, right? Like what we know that is very clear is where you did Sikran and Rashanan this year, when you're doing Rick Reverb, God, that fucking name is so insane to just say normally, and then either Styx or Sprocketmonger, that's two different levels of, that's a ramp up. But a criticism you could have had of this raid is actually that there wasn't enough of a ramp up to Brood Twister, right? So, and that wouldn't have changed the overall feeling of the raid. I actually feel like in some weird way, if they would have made Sikran and Rashanan a little harder, the overall happiness of a lot of people would have been higher because they would not have been posed with a challenge they were not prepared for, because they would have been stuck on a boss that is reasonable for them. And so they're changing that. And as far as how hard Mugsy, Silken Court, and or Mugsy, Gallywix, and One-Armed Bandit will be, who fucking knows? Like, you can test these bosses and they're super easy and then they're impossible. You can test impossible bosses and they're kind of easy. You just never know when a boss is going to... I guess Nexus Princess would die in 20 pulls, man. It took like 300 tries and we had to one-tank it. Like you just don't know what these bosses look like. You can have it fully figured out and it can still just be one of the mechanically hardest things ever. Like Nexus Princess.
Well, what would you say about the mechanical complexity? Like, not the tuning, because like we know the tuning can be completely different from what it is right now. Just
mechanically
like strictly
complex as far as like how hard it is to figure out, or how hard it is to execute and do?
To figure out and execute.
I guess both, yeah, because like the more you figure it out, the easier the execution is, right? That's why strategies exist. But I mean, I don't know, man.
Like testing, it seems, I would say, a little higher. I don't know.
Dude, there's nothing in this raid that is remotely close to how hard Silken Court was last year on testing, for example. But also, like, so much of this is defined by the end boss, right? And Anserek is a historically hard end boss. Mm-hmm. And the likelihood that we have a raid back-to-back where we have, like, a boss that's literally harder than Anserek, that would be crazy to me. Like, Anserek might be the hardest boss ever. Like, I don't know. It'd be extremely unlikely for Gallywix to be that hard. Especially 2 raids in a row where it was like Fyrak and then Anserek. Like, they're definitely trending high in the last boss difficulty since Sarkareth. If I were to guess, just looking at the overall history of things, and this is based on no information I've seen on testing, because so much of it just determines how they end up tuning it on live. I would guess that this raid is easier than the last 2, purely because there really hasn't been a time in WoW's history where raids got super hard and it stayed that way, ever. Tomb of Sargeras happens, and then Antorus happens. Significantly easier, right? It was not a coincidence that you are on Argus on the first day of Mythic Progression, the last boss out of like 11 or 12 or some shit, on the first fucking day of Mythic Progression, and it's because Tomb of Sargeras just happened. You know, like, that happens, and wow, it's happened for many, many, many expansions. So I would say just purely based on history repeating itself, I would guess it's easier, but I don't think there's any other logic outside of that makes sense to me.
Yeah, so the pendulum swinging backward.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a low confidence guess either way.
Yeah, same. Big. Yeah, I am. Just as you did earlier, I am fucking making it up right now. But that's all I can do.
What have we seen up to? The penultimate boss? Or
We've seen everything on Mythic so far.
Except the last boss.
Except the last boss, yeah. And we haven't seen the last boss at all. It's another simultaneous, which, by the way, I'm assuming maybe that's an announcement for some people in the PoddyC, but the next tier will not have a heroic week, or as so stated, not officially anywhere, but just in multiple interviews over the past few months, so we just heavily assume that's the case. How are you feeling about that, Dork? Feeling amazing?
Feeling good. I mean, I'm actually really excited for Season 2 just because of how the Mythic Plus side looks. So if the raid's good, then that's like an extra plus.
So W Mythic Plus then.
Yeah.
Yeah, so far.
I mean, it's just there's a ton of really good changes. Like no one read that post and was like, man, yeah. It's exclusively like, I could only like these things. And that's from the community that does the most meh shit ever. Like, they're just always mad, right? There's always some way to be mad about something.
Yeah, only the most always mad people were mad about this post, and usually they were mad about it because, like, why didn't Blizzard do this sooner? Rather than
which is
any of this is
okay. You
right,
could be mad about literally every good change ever.
Exactly.
they
Like
just didn't-
only those people are
The
mad
game
at
should
this
have been
one.
released like this 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest worry now is Dark Flame Cleft, honestly. And I guess just like, class design and class balance and all that.
Which
But
right now is
Dark
kind of
Flame Cleft,
interesting. They just made huge
Yeah.
buffs.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah,
I
there's
bet,
still a lot of
I bet
bugs too,
class
right?
balance has still got a lot of way to go before it goes
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
some crazy ones. There's some crazy classes.
I mean, honestly, classes don't seem that different from current tier. Like,
People
they
are
may have
doing
gone
the whole
crazy,
like
but-
you can only play ranged in the raid bit again. People do this every fucking
Every
PTR
testing.
cycle. Every testing you don't
Yeah.
optimize for melee and you play super safe, so you have downtime, and then melee leave the testing. You're like, man, I did.
It's
They
a
look,
ranged tier.
they look at damage meters and they're like, this is a ranged tier, and every single time they're wrong.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess one time it could be right, but it is what they've been saying forever. All right.
So, anyways,
All right.
the classic drama.
Oh,
The
not all
classic
right.
drama.
Back to the classic drama. What do we
Yeah.
got?
Oh, not all right? Okay, not all right.
No, yes.
No, tell us. Yeah, tell us.
Yeah, so there's actually been so much happening recently. The biggest one that we haven't covered yet is the dueling drama. I don't know if you guys have seen or heard about it.
This was it was Yamato, right?
Yeah, Yamato,
the counterpart to Pirate Software in that
Software,
drama.
yeah, the one that
Okay,
Max
yeah.
hates. Yeah, the European
Yeah.
League of Legends
I don't
guy.
like that guy at all.
Him. So
Oh, not
it was
Yamoto.
basically
I don't dislike. I mean,
Okay.
I said Yamoto's like overall disposition made me feel like he was wrong in anything he was talking about. But since then, Pirate Software called fired up a dipshit, and now I hate him forever.
So you're
well, you can
I'm
have only
pro-
one.
I'm pro Yamoto, even though I think I wouldn't like his personality very much, purely because he's an op of Pirate Software, and anyone who's an op of Pirate Software is good with me.
I see.
Enemy of an enemy.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, a lot of people don't like Yamato just because of like how he kind of acts. I mean, he's not really a bad guy. He's just like he's very European. But basically there was like some tribute chest drama, and he was kind of punished to death in the Gurubashi Arena. If you guys don't know what the Gurubashi Arena is, it's basically an area in
Yeah.
STV that you enter that will flag you, and anyone can kill you. It doesn't matter if it's like you're guilty or just like anyone who walks in. It's a free for all inside, unless you're in a party, of course.
Did he get killed?
Well, so getting to that point, they decided that it would be a duel between Yamato and Sardako, who was a Giga Classic Sweat. He's like a Giga Classic Sweat guy. He's a warrior player. He thinks he's a hot shit.
Why
he's like,
him
kinda just a
specifically? Were
PvEer.
they beefing?
Yeah, sorta. Yeah, they were kind of beefing. It was just like over the tribute chest stuff. So it was decided that the loser of the duel would be sent into the arena, and they had like all these rules assigned. You can use like certain items, and you can't do certain things just to like equal out the fight a little bit. But I mean, it heavily favors Warrior in a 1v1 duel matchup, right? Like it was Warrior versus Rogue, and Warrior just kind of like shits all over Rogue. The Rogue can't really do anything in those types of rule sets. So duel day happens. Tons of people are tuned in. Like people have been kind of hyped for this. There's been like whole Rocky montage trainings for these two guys. Like they had coaching, and they've been like doing this for like 10 hours a day for like the past few days. And so like the big duel happens. Yamato gets absolutely shit on 1-5, kind of expected because he was a rogue. And like he's like super upset about it. He was like literally crying on stream from like hundreds of thousands of people. And there were a
Really,
bunch of
I
people
would have
being-
never guessed that from his personality.
Well, no, he's like a very down to earth guy. He's just very straightforward about like everything that he says and does, right? Which is kind of like what makes
Okay,
him
I kinda get that.
unlikable. Yeah, so he's like that guy. Like he's not the type that would be like, oh, like it was not my fault. He's not a Pirate Software kind of guy. He doesn't really
Yeah,
have much of
fuck
an
that
ego.
guy.
He's just more of like a tell you how it is. And so
Did
obviously
you
a
pick your
lot of
blanket
people-
out for story time?
Yeah.
Okay, keep
oh,
going.
that's
Harvey.
I'm
good.
cozying
I didn't
up.
notice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like a lot of people were not happy with Yamato, right? For various reasons. And so, there's a lot of people like shitting on him, like calling him bad, and like, why is this
People
guy
that are going to take their
crying?
chance when he's in the
Yeah.
arena.
Yeah, and I mean, Tyler one was actually being really cool about it because he was thinking, oh, like, oh, I'm so sorry, like I let everyone down, yada yada. I let my coach down, I let Tyler one down because like he's kind of like homies with Tyler one, right? Like they're both League of Legends guys. They've been leveling together, and Tyler one was actually like really down to earth. He was like giving him the whole like dad speech. He's like, it's all right, man. It's like it's not a big deal. So, you know, there's obviously when you're playing Classic, there's a bunch of shitheads, right? Like, people are actually, like, you know, laughing at him for crying. You're like, bro, there's nothing wrong with a guy crying, right? Like, even
I mean,
like,
these are
some of the
Classic
streamers
players.
are laughing at him.
Andrew Tate has done a number on.
Yeah, exactly. Like, a bunch of Andrew
that
Tates.
generation, yeah.
Yeah, and so he was basically sent to death, right? Like, he was put in the arena. He had to survive for 7 minutes. But Tyler 1 had a SEAL Team 6 assembled to defend him, right? And this was like well known ahead of time.
Oh, is that like
Ventor?
Is that like supposed to happen?
Yeah. I mean, anything goes,
You
right?
can
Like,
do that.
the only rule was you had to go in the arena and survive for 7 minutes without a party. That's all it was.
Yeah, but I feel like if that's what everyone expected and they expected absolute mayhem, it's kind of like when people watch your Elden Ring streams and they want to watch you die and then you don't and they're mad because fuck, my content's gone.
Exactly.
If this guy goes into the Gurbashi arena and has a SEAL Team 6 protecting him and he doesn't die, then those people are going to be mad, right?
Yeah, this was literally a Roman Colosseum gladiator match. Like, if people wanted to see blood, like hundreds of thousands of people appear. Like, even in the game itself, there were hundreds of people surrounding the arena just to
that's kind of cool.
Watch. Yeah, it was actually really
That's
cool
sick.
of an event. And so people had like really high expectations, right? Like, everyone wanted to see blood. They wanted to see just like absolute slaughter. And everyone knew about the SEAL Team 6, right? Like, they were expecting them to go in. It would just be like, you know, an elite squad of 10 or so players versus the entire server, right? And that would have been insane to watch.
That's kind of badass.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I was actually watching a SEAL Team 6 POV because Grau was in it.
Can I guess what actually happened before you even tell me?
Yeah, sure.
Like, okay, so when I think of hardcore classic, I think this is a more watched thing than is participated in. Like, if you're not an OnlyFans, I don't know how many people have a hardcore character that are doing this, but I know that a lot of people watch other people that have hardcore characters that are like level 60. So who would be a 60 that is actually putting their character on the line in the Gurbashi arena to kill this guy? It wouldn't be another OnlyFans member because maybe it would be.
And like who's got a geared character on Classic? Right?
Exactly. So like, okay, so my guess would be like no one fought the SEAL Team 6 because they didn't want to lose their guy, or maybe it was a bunch of like low level viewers or something. But like, I feel like what happened?
Okay, so there's a lot to the story. So first of all, you know, like we have Pete, Ventor, you know, some of my boys. They like went into the arena. They wanted glory, right? Yeah, it was actually.
Were they trying to kill, or were they on the SEAL team?
No, they were on the SEAL team. They were part of the SEAL team, along with like a bunch of other cool dudes, just like a bunch of streamers, right? And I was watching it from Pete's POV because he was like, you know, fuck it, you know, like I'm kind of like bored of being level 60 anyways, because you know he's pretty much full bis. There's like nothing to do. I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna go in there like for glory. So there's like
for the content.
What happens first is they layer. You guys know what layering is, right?
No.
It's like sharding, right? Or
yeah, layering is literally just sharding. So
okay,
there are a couple of different shards or a couple of different layers, and the original plan was, well, Soda Poppin just wanted to layer them into a fresh layer before they started the whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Tyler 1, he hid his stream. You know, he was like coordinating with Yamato and SEAL Team 6. He like, you know, just like hid his stream. He like, you know, put his screen on full camera screen. They went into a fresh layer and then they started it before telling anyone else. And so that's the first part of the drama.
Yeah, okay, so like he started his 7-minute sentence without like before there was an opportunity for people to like get ready to kill him.
Yeah. They didn't tell anyone where the layer was or whatever. Like they just like, you know, hid the stream,
on both sides.
Layered over to a secret layer, and they're like, all right, we're starting. And then we went into the arena, right? And then like nobody was there yet. So that was the first part of it. And like a lot of the streamers wanted to chime in, right? Like it's a content guild. So a lot of the streamers, they wanted to be on the in and like know exactly where the layer is so that they can like hop in and just watch, right? But they couldn't because, you know, like obviously like Tyler 1 didn't communicate that with everyone else. Like even like Soda Pop, because Soda Poppin is the main leader of OnlyFans, right? And he felt like he was in the dark the entire time and he didn't really like the whole situation. So that was like the first part of why people were mad. And then secondly, they go into the arena and nobody does anything. There like hundreds of people appear. They're all surrounding the Coliseum, but nobody does anything because like obviously everyone's afraid to lose their character except for like a couple of people, right? Like there were actually you didn't even need many people to go in to kill Yamato. You could have just had like 2 mages go in and just like hit like a palm pyroblast and just like instantly kill
Then
Yamato.
they could die to the SEAL team.
Yeah, but they will get killed. So there was actually one person who did go in from OnlyFangs. It was actually a really cool clip. You guys should probably check it out afterwards. It was Showbeck. He was one of the classic sweats. He's he's kind of a weeb. He just runs in there. He's like, Bonkai! He just like, shouts some anime shit. It's from Bleach. And he hits the wrong rogue who was supposed to be helping kill
What the fuck?
Yamato. And he ends up getting instantly killed. But like, you know, everyone thought it was cool as hell. Everyone like really liked.
Yeah, I mean, they want to see blood,
run
right?
there.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But then, like, you know, for the next 4 minutes or so, everyone else is just kind of AFKing around. And then eventually they, like, escort Yamato out. I mean, for SEAL Team 6, it was intense the entire time, right? Like,
right, because you don't know when somebody's going to jump in.
There are just 10 people there, surrounded by hundreds of people around the arena. It's like, you don't know at what point are you going to get killed. Because there was also people who hated OnlyFangs, right? There was Sequisha, who was one of the streamers that got kicked from OnlyFangs. He had his entire new guild show up. It was like, you know, the rival
that's fucking
gang.
hype.
Yeah, it was actually funny.
That's
Like he literally
sick.
streamed the entire thing. He streamed the entire thing. He had that like whole sinister, like, you know, walk in with his entire.
Oh yeah, he thought he was him.
Goon squad. Yeah. It was like literally another
awesome.
gang of like 40 players just show up, but they didn't go in. And apparently, he said afterwards that he was like, oh, you know, I was just waiting for Tyler 1 to go in. Like, if Tyler 1 went in, I would have gone in and just like killed them all, but they didn't end up doing shit. They were complete
Yeah, that's kind of
cowards.
coward. That's coward shit.
Yeah. And like, so pretty much Yamato escapes. He's like relieved. He's like, oh, thank you guys. You know, I'm like, I'm so like appreciative of all you guys who like showed up, Team 6. But on the flip end, we had a bunch of classic sweats who were just mad about this. We had like Zaryu was one of them.
Classic sweats? Mad about something?
Yeah, Zaryu, Bean, Zico, you know, like all these guys, right? Like all these like big classic names. We were all like, oh, we should kick Yamato or like, you know, give him another punishment. Like Tyler 1 is not doing his job as a war chief. And so like that kind of escalates a bit, you know, like people are linking clips around. Tyler 1 sees these clips and Tyler 1 just like gets fucking pissed. He's like who are these like bitch ass or bitch made WoW players, you know, a bunch of pussies who don't even come in. And he was like talking mad shit about like Zaryu and Zico and all these guys. And then Zico's like, oh yeah, well if I'm a pussy, you know, like I'm not gonna run in there and like suicide my character 1v20. Like if you're gonna call me a pussy, like 1v2 me then, like I'll kill you and Yamato. So there's just like a bunch of back and forth, right? Yeah, and and then so it ended up being like the viewers, there's like two sides, right? There's like the there's like the WoW Andy's side, and then there's like the people who are fans of Tyler 1, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of escalated a little bit. We kind of went back and forth, but it kind of like, you know, died down afterwards. Tyler 1 just like said his sorries to Zaryu. He was like, you know, like maybe this guy's not actually that bad.
What did he say to
Zaryu? He was being kind
Zaryu?
of cringe about it. He just called him like a pussy bitch made WoW player.
No big deal.
Yeah, just
fucking whatever.
Dude, I get why people watch reality TV now. This is
excellent. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's like the thing is like there's like so much build up too, right? Like there's like so much backstory, like with the whole Sequisha guy who got G kicked, and like, you know, like how the duel even gets started, and like the whole build up.
Hell yeah,
love it.
All right, and on that note, we have finally exhausted our topic list for this week. We will see you guys next week for another PoddyC.
Yes. Goodbye.
Adios.
Adios.